We have the sharpest 2-year decline in life expectancy in nearly 100
Yeah,
years.
yeah, this is incredible. This is incredible. This is the first time in the past, like demographers, people who work with demographics and that are like they're epidemiologists, but they're dealing with populations. What in the past they've only dealt with changes in the forms of weeks to months. Never has the unit of change been measured in years. And what we've seen now is a drastic reduction in life expectancy. And this is something that obviously that is talked about regularly on the Majority Report, is how difficult the American life is, working life. The fact that we don't have unions that represent us, and the fact that all of the structural discrimination that exists in our society, and what that ultimately comes out to, especially when we're talking about deaths of despair, is we're seeing this rapid reduction in life expectancy. And this is the first time it happened the first year, and the fact that it happened the second year was really stunning. And we're going to see in a couple months if it follows a 3-year trend. And unfortunately, as you could expect in this American society we live in, it doesn't affect everybody the same. It disproportionately affects communities of color, and the number 3 cause of the of death is COVID. So something that prior to 2020, it didn't exist. Now the number 3 cause of death, especially when we're talking about loss of expectancy of life, is really as a result of COVID, and that's really quite stunning. So, and then of course the deaths of despair, which I know is something that you've talked about on this show several times before.
Yeah, and you can see in that life expectancy somewhere in 214, you see sort of like almost like a soft like trough, and that is particularly, I think it was white men in the sort of I think 40 to 60 age group. There was a decrease in life expectancy, largely because of the opioid crisis and suicide, and it starts to come back up actually in 2019, 2020, and then just it doesn't quite fall off a cliff, but it sort of rolls down a hill, as it were, for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And here is, pop this one up. This is showing that COVID is now the 3rd leading cause of death in the country. You see these things, and it's just sort of shocking that it's just shocking the level of denial that is in the country. Like, we can't seem to sort of even come to the sort of to the point of reconciling, like, okay, we have decided as a society we need to move forward and stop almost all mitigation of COVID, but it's almost like we can't also bring ourselves to concede what this means, that we have simply accepted a higher level of death from something, heart disease and cancer, we're throwing billions of dollars at annually to try and mitigate, to try and, cure, to change our lifestyle. And COVID is theoretically an easier lift on some level to sort of mitigate against. We won't do it. It's, I recently was on a plane, and I was just shocked. Like, maybe 10% of us are wearing a mask, and planes, they supposedly have good filtration systems, but it's why not? Like, why would I not wear a mask from I get into the airport as things start to get a little congested onto the like, why wouldn't you do it? And nobody's doing it.
100%. I don't know if you guys reported on Governor DeSantis in Florida and this kind of panel that he's putting together. That was kind of in the news last week. I forgot if you guys reported it on Friday or not, but It's just shocking. It's things like that, right, that lead to kind of that why COVID is number 3 in terms of mortality, and the reason why we are losing life expectancy. The first time ever since we've measured these sorts of things, we're falling backwards because we now have people who not only are trying to politicize it, and I know that we've got slides later talking about the politics in COVID, but how what the governor in Florida wants to do is try to create a panel looking and blaming people who are doing the right thing. I mean, it's about as Orwellian, like it just seems like we always get close to Orwellian, or we talk about, this is the most Orwellian thing that I've ever really seen. This notion of how public health professionals, and I feel bad, I have colleagues, I have friends that are in Florida that were the leaders of the public health response in Florida, and that they could potentially be called in front of committees to talk about the things that they did as if it actually caused harm, is really quite shocking, and is a reason why we're seeing COVID play so highly, due to this lack of trust and disinformation.
And what strikes me, and we're going to jump to the variants and whatnot, and start to talk about that in just a second. And we should say, in China now, it seems like they are switching gears from their zero COVID policy into really try and make it seem like we're not having a problem policy, because Xi Jinping had invested so much in terms of his domestic political power in the idea that in China, we don't have the same problems. We don't have as many deaths from COVID. We don't have as many cases as around the world. They didn't have the same vaccination. You have to have like 3 shots, and they certainly haven't had nearly the sort of like uptake on the vaccination that we have had here. They felt like they didn't need to do it because they were going to do zero COVID policy instead. They've shifted that now. And I read, I think it was today, that they are going to well, if you didn't die from COVID, we're not counting your death as COVID, the car accident. You may have gotten into a car accident, but that's not what killed you. You were alive when we took you to the hospital. So you didn't die of a car accident. I asked that because,
can I comment on?
Well, it seems to me that in China, we have the potential now for a whole new sort of round of variants coming out.